We begin tonight with the bombshell indictment against former FBI Director James Comey, a prosecution that President Trump says could be the first of several to come against his political rivals. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Comey is expected to appear in federal court in Virginia on October 9th for his arraignment on 2 charges of obstruction and perjury. His indictment alleges he falsely testified to Congress in September of 2020, and by doing so, that he obstructed a congressional proceeding. It all has to do with this exchange with Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz.
On May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, quote, "Have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?" You responded under oath, quote, "Never." He then asked you, quote, "Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration?" You responded again under oath, "No." Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
Comey says he is innocent in all of this. The former FBI chief declared he has faith in the justice system in a social media post late last night and said he is ready to test that justice system at trial. But Trump says it's clear Comey lied. The president wrote today that Comey is a, quote, dirty cop who left himself zero margin of error on a big and important answer to a question. He just got unexpectedly caught, end quote. President Trump took it a further step in a Truth Social post just a few minutes ago, calling Comey, quote, a total slimeball. Now, it's worth remembering the animosity between James Comey and President Trump goes back years. All right, let's go right now to NewsNation's Kelly Meyer live for us at the White House. Kelly, President Trump said today that more indictments could be coming. Who's he talking about? And is he talking about more indictments against Comey?
Yeah, we tried to ask the president that as he returned here back to the White House tonight. He didn't take any questions, including that one from me. He just walked on past reporters. So we're left wondering exactly who is on his list. Now, critics are saying that President Trump is going further than former President Richard Nixon did with his infamous enemies list. President Trump says there is no list, that this isn't revenge. But as you mentioned, he does say more is to come. Take a listen to this.
No, there'll be others. Look, that's my opinion. They weaponized the Justice Department like nobody in history. What they've done is terrible. And so I hope there are others, because you can't let this happen to a country.
And as soon as he got back to the White House tonight, Elizabeth, President Trump took to Truth Social and he urged Microsoft to fire one of their employees. This is someone who served as Homeland Security Advisor under President Barack Obama and Deputy Attorney General under President Joe Biden, Lisa Monaco. He calls her a, quote, menace to U.S. national security and called for Microsoft to ensure her immediate termination. Trump's Attorney General, going back to James Comey, the DOJ says they will follow the facts. As you mentioned, the arraignment set for October 9th. That will be before a U.S. district judge that was appointed by former President Joe Biden. President Trump saying today that means Comey is, quote, off to a very good start, but it is a, quote, very big price that must be paid here, he says. Elizabeth.
All right, Kelly Meyer from the White House. Thank you. Let's bring in our panel of legal experts now. Bill Brennan is a former attorney for President Trump, and John Fishwick is a former U.S. attorney for the Western District of Virginia. Great to have both of you back. All right, Bill Brennan, I'll start with you. Comey is expected to be arraigned on October 9th. This is historic, the first FBI director in history to be indicted on criminal charges. What exactly happens at this arraignment?
Well, thank you for having me, and hello, John and Elizabeth. Already, I believe, and John can weigh in on this, apparently Mr. Comey's been extended some professional courtesy He could have been, as they did with Roger Stone, swooped up in a land, sea, and air raid, but he's going to be allowed to walk into a district court. It'll be an initial appearance. He'll enter a plea of not guilty, and then he'll proceed with his case. I was surprised to see him take to the air last night. I'm sure his attorney, Patrick Fitzgerald, is bristling because, you know, it's hard, Elizabeth, when you represent big shots. And, you know, he was the SDN.
You know from personal experience, Bill.
I do. They don't listen. But he was the SDNY U.S. attorney. He was the director of the FBI. He's 6'8". He loves the camera. But my God, if he was my client, I'd want to get duct tape and muzzles. I mean, let Mr. Fitzgerald, who's very competent, do his job. But he'll enter a plea. It'll be not guilty, and the case will move on. As John pointed out last night, I gave the generic speedy trial 70-day. It'll be longer, of course it will. But I just can't. And I got to give the disclaimer: he's presumed innocent. An indictment means nothing. He's got a long road to go, but. When I just can't help but think of the irony of when he indicted Martha Stewart, the exact same arguments were made on Martha's behalf. Weak case, nuanced language, probably shouldn't have been bought. And he was yelling, "Give us Barabbas," and he was successful in that case. But now it's his turn to be on the other side. But again, he's presumed innocent. But with the clips you just played, Elizabeth, when he's really taking the president on. Yeah. My friend just wrote a book, and he quotes Omar, who was a friend of mine from The Wire. When you come at the king, you best not miss. And now it's time to see what happens.
All right. John, Comey's team is undoubtedly going to argue that this prosecution is politically motivated. And I'm sure they're going to trot out all of President Trump's public comments, both, in the days and weeks leading up to this indictment last night, as well as his comments today. Might he also bring up, Pat Fitzgerald, the fact that Trump fired the first U.S. attorney of the Eastern District of Virginia after he refused to indict Comey? Might he call Eric Siebert as a witness?
I think he will certainly try to do that, Elizabeth. I think they're going to try to make big hay out of that. I think one of the big motions for the Comey legal team is going to say, hey, look, Judge, this case was all political. They weren't going to bring this charge. The U.S. attorney was in the Eastern District, had declined to do it. Trump came out and put pressure on the office, put another U.S. attorney in there, and a few days later, this charge was brought. They're going to say that wasn't proper. It was shouldn't have been brought, and Judge, it was a political prosecution. You should dismiss it. Now, DOJ is going to respond and say, well, except the fact that the grand jury indicted you. In fact, the grand jury was pretty careful about this. Yeah. They turned down one of the charges and only indicted on two of the charges. So DOJ is going to counter, hey, look, this went through a grand jury. They indicted you. The case should move forward. But there's going to be a tremendous amount of fireworks around that motion and that hearing in front of the judge on whether it's politics or business as usual for DOJ.
So, John, the case all seems to come down to this key moment we just played in the introduction when Comey testified before the Senate in September 2020. He was asked by Senator Cruz if he ever authorized anyone to talk to the Wall Street Journal about an investigation into Hillary Clinton, actually. He said no. But Andrew McCabe, who worked for Comey, testified that he did leak information. However, Andrew McCabe's testimony is that he told Comey about it the day after he talked to the Wall Street Journal. If it's the day after, how is that authorization?
Yeah, well, there's going to get down to wordsmithing on that count one, whether he lied to Congress when he said he had not authorized it. So the lawyers are going to get into every single word and say, at the end of the day, he was telling the truth. He wasn't lying. He wasn't concealing anything. That's probably the best charge for the Comey legal team. That's the one they have the best shot at. And also his answer is it's somewhat vague. He says, I stand by it. And I'm sure his lawyers are going to say they'll play with that, too. What did he really mean when he said he's standing by earlier testimony? So there are a lot of loops that the DOJ's got to close on that one, because we're talking about previous testimony, now saying he's standing by it in Andrew McCabe. So I do think there's a lot of wiggle room for the Comey legal team on count one, but count two is much more difficult for him. Obstruction of justice, much broader.
You both said that last night. Hey,
Elizabeth and John makes an excellent point. When you look at the I guess it was done by Zoom because it was 2020. But when
It
you
was.
look at Mr. Comey's response to Senator Cruz, he basically says, "I stand by my earlier testimony." Talk about hedging your bets. Like in my
He was
state,
being very careful. He was being very,
as
very
he
careful.
should be. Look, he's
Yeah.
a smart guy. He's been in a position of indicting a lot of people. But in my home state, not in the federal system, but the state system, we have a perjury law that says if you have sworn testimony in case A that says I did it, and sworn testimony in case B says I didn't do it, the Commonwealth need not prove the lie. It's like figure it out. So
Right.
he was at least prudent enough to say, I stand
Whatever
by
I
my
said
formal
then,
testimony.
I'm sticking
Whatever I
with it.
said, whatever I said.
Yeah. By the way, Lindsay Halligan, when she presented the case, we've now learned since I spoke to the two of you last night that it was she herself before the grand jury making this case. It was her very first appearance in court ever. She has no previous prosecutorial experience.
Well, Elizabeth, we must remember, my home team, the Phillies team, brought a young fella up a year or two ago, and he pitched a no-hitter. Like,
Well, she got the indindictment, so there you go.
You can say whatever you want,
Okay.
but up to 25 people agreed with her, and that's
14.
That's where. But it can be up to 25. But
Right.
Up to X amount of people agreed with her. So if there's some type of massive conspiracy, the president leading it, they're not in on it.
All right, Bill Brennan, John Fishwick, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye, John. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, we're getting a first look at new surveillance video of the moment that a gunman attacked that ICE facility in Dallas on Wednesday. A warning, this video is disturbing. You can see ICE officers and detainees ducking for cover as they exit white vans in what looks like a parking lot. Video inside the facility shows the detainees running to safety, some tripping and falling because their hands and feet are shackled. One man appears to be bloody. One detainee was killed. 2 others were wounded. There were messages written on the shooter's ammunition. One said, quote, anti-ICE in blue ink. And at an ICE facility in a suburb of Chicago, there's another anti-ICE protest going on now for the second week in a row. It didn't take long for today's protest to turn violent. Federal agents used tear gas and pepper balls and flashbangs on a group outside the Broadview ICE Processing Center at around 8 o'clock this morning. The facility is being accused of inhumane practices. It is supposed to be a processing center for immigrants, but critics say it's been turned into a de facto detention facility. There are reports that hundreds of migrants are detained there with no showers, no access to food or medical treatment for days. The Broadview facility is part of Operation Midway Blitz. That's the name for the federal government's crackdown on illegal immigrants in and around Chicago. All right, coming up for us, the father of an American IDF soldier killed on October 7th joins me next. His son's body has been held hostage by Hamas in Gaza for more than 700 days. So what does he make of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's fiery speech at the United Nations today? I'll ask him. And the conservative movement has been galvanized in recent weeks, but prediction markets still think the Democrats will almost certainly flip the House in the midterms. We'll take a look at the numbers straight ahead. Strong words of defiance today from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he addressed the United Nations General Assembly. Netanyahu doubled down on Israel's war in Gaza, vowing to, quote, finish the job of eliminating Hamas in the region. He lashed out at leaders of Western nations like France and Canada and the UK, who have backed a Palestinian state in post-war Gaza. He said the move was, quote, insane and sends a clear message that murdering Jews pays off.
Israel will not allow you to shove a terror state down our throats. We will not commit national suicide because you don't have the guts to face down a hostile media and anti-Semitic mobs demanding Israel's blood.
Netanyahu's address was polarizing. He delivered it to a largely empty room after diplomats from dozens of countries walked out as Netanyahu took the stage. Some stayed and booed, but other delegates applauded and cheered the prime minister. And he was not deterred by his critics, some of whom have called the situation in Gaza genocide by Israel. Netanyahu pushed back, saying Hamas was to blame for the mass starvation in Gaza, and he called out countries who have failed to support Israel since the October 7th attack.
There's a familiar saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, for many countries here, when the going got tough, you caved. For much of the past 2 years, Israel has had to fight a seven-front war against barbarism, with many of your nations opposing us.
But could cracks be showing in U.S. support, at least when it comes to Israel's efforts to annex the West Bank? President Trump made his thoughts clear on that plan, speaking from the Oval Office yesterday.
I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. No, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen.
Did you speak with Netanyahu about this directly?
Yeah, but I'm not going to allow it. Whether I spoke to him or not, I did. But I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank. There's been enough. It's time to stop now, okay?
Trump today, however, said he thought negotiators were very close to striking a peace deal on Gaza. Within the last hour, he posted on Truth Social that, quote, intense negotiations have been going on for 4 days, and that there is more goodwill and enthusiasm for getting a deal done than he has ever seen before. We may be hearing more about that on Monday when Netanyahu goes to Washington, D.C. and the White House to meet with President Trump. To help break all this down, let's go to Aaron David Miller, former State Department Middle East analyst and negotiator and senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Great to have you, Aaron. So this was a very defiant speech by Prime Minister Netanyahu today, even in the face of global condemnation of the war in Gaza and the move by many to now recognize Palestinian statehood. Netanyahu called it, quote, a mark of shame on all of you. What did you make of it?
You know, Netanyahu is the longest governing prime minister in the history of the state of Israel. And he prides himself, he's nothing else. He's an extraordinary and very effective communicator. You may not like the message, but the way he uses props and his language is very, very American. One of my former bosses, the late Madeleine Albright, referred to Benjamin Netanyahu as the American Newt Gingrich. Look, the reality, I think, is very clear. Netanyahu's visit to the United States really revolves around only one constituent. Benjamin Netanyahu was not here to persuade the UN General Assembly through his rhetoric, however effective it may be for his own delegation and a fair number of Israelis. He's there to see if he can resist whatever pressures he may or not anticipate from Donald Trump. I mean, I think that's the core issue here. And the reality is 9 months on, Donald Trump, essentially, as the Biden administration, a year and a half in the wake of October 7, has failed to impose a single cost or consequence that normal humans would regard as serious, significant, or sustained pressure on Israel, or to embrace a strategy to end the war in Gaza. So we'll see. If Donald Trump wants something that would benefit him, it's all about the me, not the we. A Nobel Peace Prize. If you saw the Israeli Prime Minister standing in the way of that, you might see a different Donald Trump. But until he reaches the conclusion that he's going to get something, and the price of whatever broken crockery there would be in calling out the Israelis has to be worth something. And until now, it hasn't been.
Were you struck? I was struck by the tone of President Trump's remarks yesterday when he said, I will not allow them to annex the West Bank. Enough already. He sounded exasperated and annoyed.
Oh, I'm sure he is annoyed. I think he's frustrated and annoyed. I think he does share Prime Minister Netanyahu's ultimate goal of eliminating Hamas. He may not like the tactics, but let's be clear on annexation, Elizabeth. In the deal of the century, Donald Trump's peace plan of 2020, one of the provisions was to allow the Israelis to incorporate 30% of the West Bank into Israel proper. So he's not against annexation if it occurs in the context of some sort of deal, however unlikely that may be at the moment.
All right, Aaron David Miller, all eyes will be on this Monday meeting between President Trump and the Prime Minister, where we'll see if this peace plan that President Trump is touting this afternoon, that he says he's been working on for 4 straight days, is something that will actually become reality. There's been a lot of talk for a long time, and so far, no breakthrough. Aaron David Miller, thank you so much. Joining me now is Ruby Chen. His 19-year-old son, Itay, was serving as a soldier. Itay was serving as a soldier with the IDF on October 7th. He was taken captive by Hamas. They hold him to this day. You were at the United Nations today to hear Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speak. You got up and walked out. Why?
Because first, thanks for having me. The Prime Minister started his speech and he mentioned the names of 20 hostages. He did not mention the name of my son.
Why not?
That's a very good question. I think that maybe, he mistakenly believes that there are only 20. Sometimes the president also says 20. But no, there are 48 hostages. A, it's disrespectful. B, it is not correct. My son is no less of a hostage, regardless of what physical condition he might not be.
You have been told by Israeli intelligence that he was probably killed on October 7th. You do not know that for sure. And you want him to be treated, whether he's dead or alive, as the living hostages are being treated. It's upsetting to you and your family that more is not being done to free these people.
Yes, and again, we, the families, speak of one number and one number only, 48 hostages. And the expectation from the Prime Minister is to get all the 48 hostages out and not create some sort of standard narrative of 20. And when he said 20 and he didn't say my son's name, a U.S. citizen, by the way, which I think is also disrespectful to the United States of America and to the president, that he does not state my son's name, then I just walked out because I didn't want to hear anything else that he had to say.
You have been very critical of the Prime Minister, and you've also been critical of President Trump for not pressuring the Prime Minister to do more. What is it you want President Trump to do?
I think, it's not what I want from the president. I think what the United States of America wishes to achieve in the Middle East. And the president laid out in his inauguration almost 10 months ago his plan for the Middle East, which is ending conflicts soon and then getting to a state of prosperity.
And freeing the hostages.
And freeing the hostages. And
which he wanted on day one.
And it's been 10 months since that inauguration, which I also intended, has passed. And the question is, who's the bottleneck? Where is the bottleneck? And if the Prime Minister Netanyahu, he again spoke today about, okay, we want to finish the job. I've heard that sentence, finish the job, in November 2023, where he said to me, to my face, a little more military pressure and Hamas will come down to their knees and beg to return the hostages.
They're still saying that to this day.
And they're saying the same thing. And I'm reminding you, in January 25, we had a deal in place. There was the first phase, we had hostages come out. And then the second phase needed to begin. And then again, the Prime Minister said in January, well, let's go back into fighting. We will have a better deal because of that. And it'll be in a couple of weeks that you'll see how we have that better deal. And that is the problem with the Prime Minister. He always believes tomorrow there's a better deal than the one in front of him today. And that messes things up. And I hope that the President in this Monday meeting, explains to the Prime Minister, this is the deal. It's a very good deal for the state of Israel. Take it and let's move on. Yeah. And allow us as collateral damage to finally have our peace as well.
I am so sorry that you continue to endure this. You have a yellow piece of tape on your suit jacket lapel. It says 721. That's the number of days your son's body has been held in Gaza. It's a piece of tape because you have to update it every single day with a new number. I hope this nightmare is over for you and your family soon.
God bless. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. All right, coming up for us, we're going to switch gears to the story of one of my colleagues, shy, bullied, diagnosed with autism. Leland Vittert had a father who refused to let that diagnosis define his son. And Leland's out with a new book and a NewsNation special. He joins me next. $15 million American children are living with a diagnosis of some kind of mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. Too often, those kids are written off as lost causes, troubled beyond saving. Well, guess what? NewsNation's Leland Vittert was one of them. Many of you know Leland now as a seasoned foreign correspondent turned chief Washington anchor. He's smart, sharp-witted, and warm. He welcomes you into your living room every night at 9. What you may not know is just how out of reach those achievements may have once seemed for a young boy diagnosed with autism at an early age. A boy who didn't talk until he was 3 years old. A boy teachers called weird and was bullied in school. Leland may have believed all those things about himself, too, if it weren't for his father. His dad saw his potential and sacrificed a whole lot to get Leland where he is today. That love story between father and son is the subject of Leland's new book called Born Lucky. A new special hosted by Bill O'Reilly is airing on NewsNation this Sunday. Take a listen to an excerpt.
The one thing my dad and I bonded over, my dad was my best friend. What did my dad know about? Politics and business. He would talk to me endlessly. I was 6 years old. I could talk to you about Dukakis and Mondale and George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton and Ross Perot and everything else, the Gulf War. Because my dad was the only guy I talked to.
Leland's here with us now. Hey there, congratulations on this book.
Thank you.
Your dad was the only person you talked to? For how many years?
Yeah, for probably about 5 or 10. You know, when I was diagnosed at about 5 years old, my parents had been told they needed to get me evaluated. Worst thing parents can hear, they take me to one of those little psychology testing centers, right? And the woman takes me away, and they're sitting there with the old magazines and stale coffee, and the woman comes back after about 2 hours, and she says, it's very difficult to understand what is going on inside his head. And this is a psychologist talking. So severe learning disabilities, take you through Born Lucky with the real behavior issues I had, which were significant and unable to relate to kids my own age. And my dad asked this psychologist, you know, what can I do? And she said, not much. He said, is there anything we can do? And she said, generally not. So that was the baseline. And my dad said, I realized, you know, you weren't going to have any friends. You weren't going to be good in school. Athletics weren't an option for me. And he said, knowing you wouldn't be able to have friends, when we started working on this book, he said, I thought I could be your friend. So he quit his job and became my best and only friend.
Oh, my God, you're going to make me get like I'm tearing up listening to that. You know, autism is a spectrum. Where on the spectrum did you fall?
It's hard to say. I think probably right now they would say I was sort of moderate to high functioning, moderately functioning in some ways, high functioning in others. This was 1986. Autism then was not known to be a spectrum. It was either you're profoundly autistic, is what they would call it now, or not at all. So there wasn't a lot of options. And the decision my dad made at that point was...
Were you considered profoundly autistic?
No, I was not.
Okay.
So I would now what you'd be called somewhere sort of high to medium functioning autistic.
Okay.
And the idea that my dad said was, if I allow you to be diagnosed, you're going to be defined by the diagnosis. And it's going to give people an excuse to write you off, but it's also going to give you an excuse to not change. So he wanted to adapt me to the world, not the world to me. There was no special time on tests. There was none of that.
He actually would take you out, like to restaurants and diners, and coach you on how to look somebody in the eye and how to respond when they asked you what you wanted to order. Like, he actually sat by you and coached you on how to be in the world and how to communicate.
Right. So we'll role play this, right? I would have loved to go to lunch with you because you know about all the things that I was interested in. I was always interested in the news and business and media and everything else. So we'd be going out to lunch with Miss Vargas, which would be Miss Vargas because politeness was a key part of my dad's teachings. And I would sit there, and before we would sit down, I would start bugging you. Who writes your scripts? How early do you start preparing? How do you pick your stories? How do you pick your guests? How do you think about what questions? What do you read? Before you looked at the menu. And rather than saying, like, Lucky, you need to be quiet, he would tap his watch. And that was my signal to be quiet. And then I show you in Born Lucky how he then would coach me afterwards of, okay, so when Elizabeth or Miss Vargas was talking about, you know, what she was doing this weekend in her yoga or her running or whatever, why did you think you should talk about what you did to work out in time he was having me do push-ups? Or why do you think it was important for you to talk about, you know, her kids or whatever it was?
Yeah.
Why didn't you ask her about her kids when you asked? So it was all a way of teaching the social interactions. And it's still, for me today, a learned skill, right? And there's times that I fail miserably in it, but it is still a learned skill from him.
Leland Vittert, the book is extraordinary. It comes out at a time when there's a lot of discussion about autism, but I just have to say, your dad sounds like one amazing man. Really great.
Clearly very amazing. And look, you know, this book has some of my darkest, actually all of my darkest moments in it, right? And my dad never told anybody I had autism. We were always a very private family about this stuff. I'm writing it now and sharing it, not for me, a little bit for him to say thank you, but because I really want to give families hope. There are so many families, not just autism, ADHD, you went through everything, that are struggling right now and they feel alone. They're not alone. And Born Lucky is real hope for these parents.
Everybody should read it. Leland, congratulations. It's really amazing.
Thank you.
All right. The book
Thanks for
Born
the support.
Lucky is out next week. And of course, his special airs Sunday night at 8 Eastern only. Watch on NewsNation. So many families struggle with this, and he gives them all some real hope. All right, coming up for us, President Trump has often expressed his love for the country of India and its people.
We love India.
But now people are making bets online that his relationship with the country is as dead as it can be. What's going on? We'll get into it next. All right, now for our new and regular segment called The Smart Money. From government shutdowns to the Ryder Cup, people are using sites like Kalshi and Polymarket to bet on news events. And as we've noted in the past, these prediction markets have had an impressive record of correctly indicating what's coming up. In just the past few hours, we've witnessed some remarkable activity. NewsNation's Hannah Doba has the story.
Prediction markets are sending a very different signal than the headlines this week, and the gaps are striking. Let's start with politics. After the Kirk assassination, Republicans have been talking about a political reawakening. Voter registration data even shows a bump, but the markets are not buying it. On Kalshi, contracts still price Democrats with about a 2-to-1 advantage. 65% odds of taking the House in 2026 compared to 35% for Republicans. For all the noise, traders are holding steady, saying they'll wait for real data before shifting those odds. The bigger moves are happening inside federal agencies after Trump's EPA chief went on Fox News calling climate change a con job. The odds that Trump would order the EPA to stop operating didn't just nudge, it skyrocketed from about 10% to 60% almost overnight. And when Trump abruptly canceled millions of dollars in school grants, Department of Education contracts spiked the same way.
You better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
The markets are telling us that policy disruption at the agency level is seen as the most immediate impact of this administration, far more volatile than the odds on who controls Congress. And then there's foreign policy. Trump's decision to slap a $100,000 cost on H-1B visas, a move widely seen as derailing Asian immigration.
Sort of like a signing bonus in baseball or football.
It sent India's markets into a nosedive.
We love the Hindus. We love India.
The odds of Trump making a trade deal with India this year are stuck at 13%. And the chance of him even visiting India in his first year is at a record low. Compare that to Israel or France, where the probabilities are higher. And you can see how traders are recalibrating America's international priorities. So the bottom line here, markets are cutting through the chatter. They're not reacting to the voter registration buzz. They're laser focused on where policy is already shifting, inside agencies and in immigration. And right now, traders are betting that's where the real action is.
All right, the wisdom of the crowds. I want to zero in on one of the topics that Henna just hit on there, and that's the midterms and Republican voter registration. And joining us right now is NewsNation political contributor and Princeton University political scientist, Dr. Lauren Wright. What do you make of the fact that the vast majority of people on Kalshi, at least, still think the Democrats are going to win the House back next year in the midterms? 65% of them. That's despite all the uptick in voter registration we've seen for Republicans in the last 10 days.
Well, history would be on their side, Elizabeth, but betting markets are really interesting. They're a bit of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, there's more information than a public opinion poll. People are willing to put their money, their resources behind these guesses. But as we know from horse racing, car racing, sports, whatever you like, a long shot can be very financially rewarding. And so you do have to bake in a bit of risk there. I do think if I had to guess, Republicans will keep the Senate, will lose the House. But if these redistricting efforts are successful, which they do seem to be, they've got some wiggle room there.
It is worth noting that since the 1950s, the president's party has lost an average of 26 House seats in the midterms. I mean, it's just a matter of how big, as Obama called it, the shellacking is. Democrats only need 5 or 6 seats to flip the House their way.
Exactly. And in 2022, they did much better than they thought they would with an unpopular president and high inflation. And so that might give Republicans some hope there. But I would bet on history and the track record probably if I had to, Elizabeth.
We've seen many reports that Democrats are facing a voter registration crisis. According to the New York Times, of the 30 states that track voter registration by political party, Democrats have lost ground to Republicans in every single state. But Republicans are making very strong gains with Gen Z.
Yes.
This goes against everything we've ever seen historically. Young people usually register blue and then turn redder as they get older and more experienced.
That's right. And so the danger with, over counting on those young voters is they don't turn out a lot of the time. And I'm not saying anything against young people. I spend all day with them a lot of the time.
Them.
Yes, but they only vote in general elections about half the time. And in the midterms, that's like a third of the time. So if those young Republicans turn out and they might be very energized and they have a lot of good messages behind them, that could be. But again, what we know from recent history is young voters they can be a little unreliable, Elizabeth.
Super quick, Lauren, what do you make of these prediction markets? Do you think, obviously people aren't just betting, they're doing some research if they're going to plunk down some cash.
I think they tend to be a reflection of all the information we have already. And so they can be helpful, but over-reliance on them, I think, can be a little dangerous.
Sort of like over-reliance on polls. Don't do it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
All right. Lauren Wright, have a great weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, coming up for us, the government is set to shut down in 5 days. 5 days. Could there be mass layoffs ahead? And who will be blamed? Chris Cuomo joins me live next to discuss. NewsNation's newest host, Batya Ungar-Sargon, just sat down with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to talk about all things Trump, Elon Musk, H-1B visas, and, of course, the economy. Here's part of that conversation.
In a lot of polls, people don't feel that things are getting better for them. Inflation is proving rather sticky. How can the American people expect, or when can they expect the price of groceries to go down? And how does the president plan to get their confidence back on the economy for everyday regular Americans before the midterms?
Right, you're seeing gas finally drop lower and lower and lower, so that's going to matter, right? Open markets so that our farmers can be more successful and they can grow and have confidence that they can sell their goods around the world will drive down our costs here.
The interview airs this Saturday at 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern right here on NewsNation. And, we've had so much news going on. Chris Cuomo joins me now live. All the talk about the Comey indictments, the ICE shooting, of course, the Charlie Kirk assassination. This government shutdown is looming, just 5 days away. You're going to have 2 congressmen from both sides of the aisle. I've been already hearing Republicans on TV trying to call it the Schumer shutdown. They're both trying to say it's their fault if it happens. What are you going to ask these 2 congressmen?
Why do you suck so bad? Why do you suck so bad?
I beg you to actually ask that question.
That's exactly what I'm going to say coming out of the box. And off the top of the show tonight, this is the upside to not caring if you have any friends. So I am going to show what the real stakes are here. And I'm no Kalshi, but I am a fan of these betting markets. I think it's a really interesting advance. It's fraught with a lot of different concerns down the road. But
it is fraught, but I find it fascinating.
It makes people be more interested and more intelligently so, because you're not just your mouth and some keys, it's cash.
Yeah, I don't want to throw my 20 bucks away. I'm going to do my homework first.
And I'm sure a lot of people are betting a lot more than that. But I don't think there's going to be a shutdown. Why? Because the right doesn't want this fight. It's not about illegals. It's not about trans, to use their phrases. And the left can't be connected to another bad outcome. And they're going to be making the bet that this plays as strength. And I don't think shutdowns do. All right, I got to jump.
All right.
But I appreciate you, Elizabeth, and I wish you a good weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.